Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for taking the time today to join us. We very much appreciate it. Today we're going to focus on participants. And I think one thing we can all agree on hopefully is that participants really are the lifeblood of our industry. And I'm so happy today to have a group of experts with me on the session to share with you some of their favorite tips about how we can all do a better job at engaging respondents or participants. I'll introduce myself last. So introducing Lisa first. Lisa, I've known Lisa a long time, not only a tech wizard when it comes to survey platforms, but also really super passionate about engaging participants. And I've had the pleasure of working with Lisa for a number of years on both trust and participant engagement. So really great to have you on board, Lisa. Melissa from RTi, hugely experienced researcher from the agency side, so what we call piggy in the middle when it comes to the end clients and the data collectors. So really seeing both parts of the process, all parts of the process really and sees the good and the bad very much that can happen when you create a good experience or a bad experience. So it's great to have you two here. Melissa, Raina, great to have you also from Peapod Digital Labs. If people don't know Peapod, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Raina, but it's all about e-commerce and digital strategies for the Ahold Hayes Group, which is one of the world's largest food retailers, if I got that right. And obviously, Raina is the client side person on the panel, super important role in between the actual end users, the research, and everybody else in the process. So shaping those business needs into research solutions, and then obviously delivering and implementing those, obviously super crucial also for her role in getting not only that right, but also engaging participants along the way. So great to have you too, Raina, here. And finally, but not least on the panel, unfortunately, we can't have Kerry on the video today, but Kerry's joining us from LA. And Kerry, about three and a half years ago, I think, set up Echo Market Research, and really over the last few years has grown that company tremendously, with I think very much due to a focus on participant and engaging and understanding the role of people in the process of collecting data. So fantastic also to have you on board, Kerry. And myself, Andrew Cannon, Executive Director of the GRBN, the Global Research Business Network. And our mission really is all about, I suppose, ensuring a bright future for our sector by engaging participants. One of the things we're doing, building trust, demonstrating the ROI of insights, codes, guidelines, anything you can think of that we do to promote and protect the industry. That's what we're trying to do through a network of 40+ national and regional federations. So I think that's enough about us. So let's dive in, and I'll give a little bit of background to what we've been doing here. Before going any further, I really want to thank our sponsors, because, without their financial but also practical support in not only sponsoring the research, but also providing resources, providing experience of practicalities, this work wouldn't be done. So it's a really important process. I'd like to thank RTi Research and Tango Card, our gold sponsors on this project of participant engagement, our silver sponsor, InnovateMR, and our 4 bronze sponsors, Echo Market Research, LiveMinds, Market Vision Research, and Opinion from the UK. So a big thank you to them. So before getting into the details of the tips, just a quick overview of why we believe participant engagement is so important, and why it really starts from this question of the user experience. Really, consumers or people as participants have become super demanding when it comes to the user experience, particularly on the mobile device. They're doing things on Instagram, YouTube, Netflix, etc., which are renowned for the great user experience they're getting. And they're starting to expect the same thing when they engage with other platforms, other apps, and market research is no exception to that. So it's a very high bar, and it's needed if we are going to improve participant engagement. Now, participant engagement through our research, we know, is one of the key building blocks of driving trust. The two other building blocks that we've identified are trust with personal data and transparency. That's been super important. And thirdly, trust or an understanding that there's a value to participating. So what is the value of somebody giving their time to participate in research? Not only obviously understanding the value to business, but also the value to people as consumers and citizens. So if you can get those three things right, you're going to get a high level of trust in market research, which will lead at the end of the day to an increased likelihood to participate. We've got the research to show us that. And taking this further on towards the client side, you know, it sort of has a direct impact not only on data quality, but at the end of the day on the business impact of insights, which I think, as Raina could talk to, you know, is critically important in today's world for not only helping decision makers, but also for growing the insights budget, which at the end of the day our industry really needs if we're going to be strong and vibrant moving forward. So this is super important. So just a couple of words about trust, as participant engagement is such a core element when it comes to building trust. Now, GRBN earlier this year conducted a global trust survey where we interviewed 10,000 people across 10 countries, and really looking at the level of trust in market research compared to other types of organizations. And super interesting, this year we also looked at how COVID-19 and the pandemic is influencing trust, but we're not going to cover that thing today. Let's save that for another webinar. But when we're looking at trust, that we know that market research, I suppose, is, if it was a report card, it would say we're okay, right? We're reasonably trusted. We're not hugely distrusted. We're more trusted as an industry than, say, polling or data analytics. But on the other hand, we suffer very much when it comes to trust with personal data. There is this distrust with people as to whether we are protecting their data, but also whether the use of their personal data is appropriate. So, you know, when you're designing surveys, definitely think about this issue of trust and how that relates to this personal data side of things. One of the things we also researched when we were looking at trust was the user experience and the participant engagement. And we had a number of measures, but the one I want to point out today is this issue of enjoyability, because it is so fundamental in today's world that we do give people an enjoyable experience. And as you can see from this chart, it shows that over the 10 countries, that on average, you know, only 40% of participants are saying that all or many of their experiences were enjoyable. So basically 6 times out of 10, we're actually failing to deliver a high level of enjoyable experience to participants. And I don't know if you think about, you know, your clients, or you think, if you are a client, you think about your own business, you know, how your business would look if you're a restaurant, for example, you know, and 6 times out of 10, somebody came in and they had a bad meal. You know, it's not very likely that you're going to remain in business for a long time. So this is super important. As you see, there is variation across countries, but on average, you know, I think the report card says that we have a fair amount of work to do if we are going to give people more enjoyable experiences, which is one of the keys to driving participant engagement. So a couple of final remarks on why participant engagement matters, why it's important. One of the findings here on the left-hand side from the trust survey itself shows that impact of that positive user experience on trust. So you can see there that, you know, if you are giving people a positive experience, 59% of those people are likely to say that they trust market research. Whereas you go to the other side, and you're giving a negative experience, well, the majority then are switching and saying, well, no, I don't trust you. And obviously there's a chicken and egg thing going here, but whatever the cause is, does a lack of trust cause a bad experience, or does a negative experience cause a low trust? I don't think that's important. What is important is the relationship between the two, and understanding that if we can give people a more positive experience, we are more likely to have them trust our industry. And finally, on the other side of the chart, we're looking at something which I think is super important, is that what do people do when they have a bad experience? Now, our research earlier showed us very clearly that the number one thing they actually do is they think badly about the brands in the survey. Yes, they might go on and speed, they might go on and close down their survey, but ultimately it's an emotional reaction to say, oh, that was a bad experience. And who are they going to blame? They're not blaming the agency, they're not blaming the data collector, but they're blaming the brand or the brands in the survey. Now, obviously a lot of surveys are blinded, so they don't particularly know who that survey has done. But in general, they're gonna, if it's about banks, they're gonna think badly about their bank, or they're gonna think badly about banks in general. And, I talked to a CMO about this, and they're saying, well, we spend a lot of money trying to get people to feel great about our brand. How can we think about destroying it, or even destroying trust in our sector through bad experiences? And, and he was saying that, hey, let's treat market research as a touch point. Let's make sure that we understand that it's an interaction with consumers, just like any other touch point. So without further ado, I think that's enough of me talking for now. I'll come back at the end to wrap this up. But in the meantime, we're not going to go through all the 30 tips, but we're going to share what the experts on the panel today are their 2 favorite tips. A total of 8 tips out of the 30 we're going to show today. And Lisa, if you're first up, so go ahead and tell us what you love about this.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, it's super challenging for me to pick just 2 tips from the handbook. I'll just start there. But however, I think tip 3 for me is certainly at the top of my list. Being transparent and demonstrating, a respect for people's privacy is really a central concern for our industry. As our hunger for data and personally identifiable information has grown over the years, I believe we've really lost our way, and participants are demanding more from us. So these 2 charts paint a pretty concerning picture. When it comes to the appropriate use of personal data by the market research industry, we observed that 21% of participants believe our use is somewhat or very inappropriate, with an additional 37% indicating a neutral belief, and a 9% expressing uncertainty. Only 33% believe our use of personal data is appropriate, which reinforces that we need to be more transparent and make improvements in this area. In terms of how informed participants feel, 32% bottomed out as feeling very or somewhat uninformed, followed by 31% indicating a neutral position on the scale, and an additional 6% expressing indecision here, with only 31% feeling very or somewhat informed about data and how it's collected, stored, or used. It is really safe to say that we're not doing an adequate job of informing participants. But what can we do to turn the tide here? It starts by taking a really transparent approach. We need to move away from including intense and lengthy legal jargon in our panels and our studies. A 30-page privacy policy is designed to protect companies, but it does nothing beyond confuse and even intimidate participants. Including a concise and simple summary of your privacy protocols will really help quell concerns and educate participants in a very more, a more material way. And you have to ask yourselves, do we really need to collect PII for this study? What purpose does it really serve? Always include an informed opt-in versus an opt-out, and let participants know exactly how you will be using their data. Lastly, work within your business to ensure that your colleagues understand the importance and sensitivity of personal information. And that, you know, they're really staying informed. I think that's important too, that we stay informed on all the evolving privacy regulation. It's a really dynamic situation with many states, countries, and regions in the world constructing significant changes as it relates to legislation. So all of that, a lot of food for thought there. But next, I'll pass it over to Kerry, who's going to be discussing the motivations of research participation. Over to you, Kerry.
Thanks so much. So in the research industry, we've really created an odd paradigm. In the qual world, we grow databases based on the fact that people can earn money. Sometimes that money is in the hundreds of dollars. You know, we see that reflected here on this chart. To participate in surveys, you know, we've done the same thing. So in the quant world, you know, we also offer people money to participate in surveys and promote joining those databases by saying things like, you can make money participating in surveys. Then we pay them in pennies and wonder why data quality is bad or their experience is bad. So over the years, we've talked to a lot of different participants as well as surveyed them. And we've learned that the intrinsic motivations are almost as important, and you can see that reflected here as well, as an industry, and we should play to that. We should be talking about why this is interesting, fun, and educational. We should sell them on the importance of what we do because we know they like it. People care about the products they use, and really market research is a unique opportunity to be able to participate in the experience of influencing those brands. So back to the transparency thing that Lisa just mentioned, you know, part of the transparency that is important that participants would like to hear back about is what's happening with the information that they're giving us. So we can also promote the experience by creating that feedback loop, help share back some of the information that we're getting as much as we can. You know, it helps them feel in the know, and they want and need that as much as they're interested in the monetary aspect of this. And it shouldn't be a problem to give them the experience that they're looking for. Over to you, Raina.
Thank you, Kerry. So as I was reading through these tips, one of the ones that resonated very strongly with me is, do you need it tomorrow? Now, I spent a large majority of my career on the supplier side, and when you're interacting with the client, with the brand itself, a lot of times it seems that the brand is disorganized or just maybe not on their game or doesn't understand market research. But that's not the case. A lot of times things move very fast on the client side. And as an industry, we've been moving faster. Now, I see this as our responsibility on the insights team on the brand side to educate senior leadership on what the trade-offs are. So as suppliers, we can also help talk to the client, but a lot of times it's coming from a different internal pressure. So as we take a look at that, do we need it tomorrow? Sometimes yes. Sometimes businesses are making critical decisions and they're up against competition and they need an answer right away. A lot of times though, we don't need it that quickly. It's a matter of internal communication, explaining what we're going to be missing. We're going to miss an entire segment of the population. We're not going to talk to our entire footprint if we're only talking to people at midnight on a Thursday. So we want that to spread across. Now, because we are moving at this super fast pace, one of the things to think about as we're compressing timelines is, one, keep an eye on the questionnaire, make sure that that is a good survey instrument, but two, protect the timeline of the fielding. And as we need to dial back and compress timing, think about that on the reporting end, because perhaps the client can just run with a few KPIs. We can take a look at some of those key metrics, answer some of the critical questions, and then take some time on the back end to dig into the data a little bit deeper as we have a little bit more breathing room. I'll pass that over to Melissa.
Thanks, Raina. So keep it short. Tip number 9 is one of my passions, and yeah, I'm sure that you'd be hard pressed to find a respondent that says the survey was too short. Think back to what Andrew said earlier about only 4 in 10 surveys being enjoyable, and the less enjoyable it is, the longer it's going to feel. So you can see on this chart here, this was a survey that was just about 10 minutes, and a third said that it was over a third said it was too long in just about every market. So why do we care? The longer the survey, the more likely people are to abandon the survey, and the lower it also risks data quality. So how do we get the survey shorter? There's 2 ways. One is the actual survey length, and the other is the perceived survey length, or how long it feels to the respondents. Perceived survey length can be impacted by at least by a number of factors. At least in part, it's impacted by the topic. So for those of you doing research on things like cookies, that's good news. For those of you doing surveys on things like insurance, not so good. But it's still within your power as a researcher to help reduce those survey length perceptions. I'm not going to get into specifics now, but things like conversational language, motivational phrases, avoiding long grids and other difficult types of questions to answer, and even something simple like including a progress bar to help people understand where they are in the survey can all help reduce the perceived survey length. This Engage handbook, as well as the previous one, contain lots of other tips to help with that. Lisa, if you want to advance to the next slide. So the other factor in the equation is the actual survey length. And you can see from this chart that as the surveys get longer, abandonment increases, survey completion rate decreases, with the key drop-off point really being at that 8 to 9 minute mark. And it's not a lot of time. When you think, let's just make the math easy, think about a 10-minute survey. When you think about a 10-minute survey, that's about 30 questions. Take out the screening and the classification, and you're down to about 20 questions. And now some of you are probably panicking, saying, how can I get all of my business questions answered in 20 questions? You can. I've done it. There's obvious exceptions. So a market landscape study or a segmentation study obviously needs to be longer. But there's things in those cases, perceived survey length becomes more important. So it's more important to give those easier tasks, give mental breaks, etc. But by and large, the average survey can be less than 10 minutes. So one of my largest clients a few years ago said all of our surveys are going to be 10 minutes or less. And as both the corporate research department and suppliers like me, we all scratched our head and said, we're never going to be able to do this. Our surveys are 15 to 20 minutes. There's no way we're going to get them reduced. Every time we try to cut out questions, someone adds 3 more. But in reality, once we started putting the pen to the paper, so to speak, it wasn't so difficult. Cutting out the classification questions that really weren't pertinent to the business question and weren't going to be used was a quick way to shave off a couple of minutes. We could use more conversational language, which helped reduce just reducing the amount of words people needed to read on the screen. Figuring out quicker ways to ask questions. Even some things like taking 5 or 6 diagnostic questions, grouping those into an attribute battery. That one attribute battery with 5 to 6 statements is much quicker to answer than 5 to 6 individual questions. So as researchers, our natural inclination is to ask questions. But everything that we add, it's easy to add these nice to know questions, but it all drives up the survey length. The critical thing here is to ask yourself, is that question really critical to the business need? When it's yourself, adding those questions or your team adding those questions, it's easy enough to say, nope, it's not critical. But we all know whether it's business partners or clients, when they add the question, they think it's absolutely important, even though it may not be central to the key idea of the study. In that case, we tend to remind them, look, if this is not absolutely need to know, let's drop it. You'll get better quality data, and that alone usually convinces them to keep the to omit that question. I'm going to pass it on to Lisa now.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa, so much. Okay, so here's tip 11, optimize and test for mobile. At my last company, I spent a great deal of time helping the firm embark on mobile optimization. As a panel company, we could see a major change happening. More and more participants were taking surveys on their mobile device. And this was not a surprising circumstance, as mobile penetration rates and smartphone utilization have been increasing for years. However, we had a problem on our hands. The design of our client surveys were very much built for desktop completion. Several years later, this disconnect between design and our participant universe sadly still exists. In the GRBN's recent trust survey, we saw that over half of young people took the survey on their mobile device, and over 1/3 of participants aged 35 plus also took the survey on their mobile. I should mention here that as a panel company, we can see as much as 60% of panelists coming in from a mobile device on any given day, yet the average length of interview time exceeds 20 minutes across our clients' surveys. While survey platforms and scripting tools offer many, many mobile optimization options, our industry's design lacks a mobile-first strategy. Grids, for example, are really great from a computational perspective, but they're extremely laborious for mobile users. Even if we repeat scales and break attributes across multiple screens, our research shows that these methods create fatigue, they increase suspend rates, and they really just burn out participants, which really, in essence, reduces our chances of engaging these people in the future. So we need to stay mindful on our design methodologies and think about participants first. While our appetite for data continues to grow and grow, we need to demonstrate self-discipline and only collect what is absolutely critical and recognize the fact that our data quality and ultimately our insights will suffer greatly if we don't create a positive experience for participants. So with that, next I'll pass it back over to Kerry to discuss the important role of survey length.
Thanks, Lisa. So one of the chief complaints we hear from survey participants, and we actually also hear this in qual, especially digital qualitative, is that our industry isn't upfront and transparent about how long activities are going to take. So a survey says 10 minutes in the invitation and it's 25 minutes. Or worse yet, you've got a survey that we tell them is 30 minutes and it's 45 minutes. So people indicate that they actually set aside time in their days, like to relax before they go to bed or on their lunch break to take surveys. And it's incredibly frustrating for them when it takes more time than they've allotted based on the information that we gave them. So time and time again, especially when we recruit from social media, we see very high drop-off rates, and the participants will actually reach out to us directly and say that it wasn't worth their time, it was too complicated, it took much longer than you said it would. So, with those experiences, not only did we lose that individual for the project, which obviously costs money, but we've left a bad taste in their mouth and soured them on the experience and our industry. The worst case scenario here is where we've given them a negative feeling about the category. So if we're talking about, cookies, and we're talking about a specific brand, and we've burned them in this experience, they're walking away thinking about that brand negatively, and that's not good. Because we're close to our participants, we're able to get that feedback, and when we tell our clients, they're surprised and indicate that they typically just push more panel, which I think is probably something that we've all come across, but it's really just such a backwards mindset. Of course, the databases are a commodity, but they're individuals that make up this commodity. And so if our, if the idea that we all have agreed on is, well, it doesn't matter, let's just push more people into it, we really need to change that thinking, because it's damaging across so many different fronts. So, another way to think about this is and has been mentioned already, is the user experience. The user experience is crucial, so crucial that there's a whole sector of our industry devoted to that. But somehow all of that knowledge goes right out the window when we're talking about survey length and survey design. And the other side of this is it also puts suppliers in terrible positions, because if they push back about survey length, then the client's just going to go to another sample provider. So it's creating this scenario where there just can't be the meaningful change that there absolutely needs to be. Raina?
Thank you. So the importance of doing qualitative research before you conduct any quant, it goes without saying almost, but it doesn't often factor into the budget. So my advice here is to make sure from the client perspective that you save some budget to be able to offer qualitative ahead of time. And I say that for several reasons. So one, we are subject matter experts. We all become subject matter experts in our field. And because we are living and breathing our jobs, sometimes we get jargon in our questionnaires and we think that is entirely clear to us, but it will not be clear to the participant. So using qualitative ahead of time will help you solve for that and help you develop a better survey instrument. Another example, recently, we know, for instance, that sustainability is important to our customers. And we were embarking on a quantitative survey and we hadn't planned on doing any qual ahead of time. But then we pushed the brakes and we said, well, let's talk to participants, see how they're thinking about sustainability, and are we asking the right questions? What we found was that our assumptions we were a little bit right, but we had missed the mark on an entire section of sustainability, which we never would have known that the quantitative survey wasn't going to give us what we needed had we not conducted the qual first. So that gave us this rich playing field of information to be able to pull into the quant and make sure that we had the right questions in front of our customers. And then the third example that I'll offer is we recently conducted a conjoint and we needed to know which attributes to include in that study. And as part of that, we can sit around the table and brainstorm and say, these are definitely the top 10 that we want to focus on. But as we conducted qual, we realized, hey, there are these other 7 factors we didn't even think about that came into play that were super important to be able to include and give us a more robust set of findings. So 1, it helps remove jargon. 2, it helps develop the best questionnaire that you possibly can, and it makes sure that you're hitting on all of the points that you need to make business decisions. Pass to Melissa next.
Thanks, Raina. So the last tip of the day is keeping the wording simple and conversational, writing like a human. And it sounds simple, but how many times do you cringe when you're reading a legal document full of legalese and ask yourself why this can't just be written in English? As Raina mentioned, there's a lot of times there's industry jargon in addition to our own researchees, and it's impacting us as an industry that the surveys are becoming unintelligible. So take a simple question. Think about purchase interest, and the standard way of asking that is, how likely would you be to purchase this product, assuming it was available in stores where you normally shop, and and at a reasonable price, and in flavors that you typically purchase, rather than just simply asking, how likely would you be to purchase this product? We did some research on research, and we found out that no matter how we ask it, whether it's with all the research caveats or just simply how likely would you be to buy this product, we got the same answers. And so there's really no need for all of those caveats. It's things that we've been taught that we need to be absolutely precise in what we're asking. And we certainly need to be clear, but we need to make sure that the writing doesn't become so convoluted that it becomes a chore for respondents to read. In a worst case scenario, it's a daunting paragraph of text that respondents need to read through. And it can, at the worst, it can turn off respondents to reading the question altogether. They look at the scale and guess what's being asked and then answer the question. Obviously, that's not great either. And so we want to do what we can to make sure that respondents are reading the questions themselves. Given all the stipulations that we tend to include in a variety of questions, it's not surprising that 9 in 10 respondents say that they want surveys to be more concise and conversational. So, if respondents actually understand what we're trying to ask, we're going to end up with better quality data, and they'll be more likely to take another survey. It ends up being a win-win. In addition, the simpler, more conversational language ends up reducing the perceived survey length, as well as the actual survey length, which I spoke to the importance of earlier. So yeah, obviously you want to keep the basics in mind, make sure that the question is clear, it's not biased, it's not containing double-barreled statements, but you can do things like stripping out unnecessary instructions. So particularly with an online survey, there's no need to repeat the scale within the question text itself. Ask yourself, are all of those caveats really necessary? Do we need to say this will be available where you normally shop at a reasonable price in the flavors you typically purchase? Respondents are going to assume that anyways, particularly if the concept says all of that information. Can you group several questions into an attribute battery to reduce the amount of text that people need to read? A lot of times we'll ask someone if they've done a particular behavior first before asking a follow-up question. Can the answer of "I didn't do this" simply be an answer at the end? Lastly, making sure that every question is central to your business objectives and is actionable. I'm going to pass it on to Andrew.
Well, fantastic. I'd really like to thank all of the panelists, the people on the webinar today for such a great job. I mean, it's not only explaining the tips, but it's really showing both that passion as well as that expertise for this subject. So I'm really, really grateful to all of you for that. When I reflect on this, I think, why do we still as an industry continue to give people poor experiences? And I think on the one hand, it should be easy to change this, right? It's not rocket science what we're suggesting here, right? These tips, basically all of them in the handbook, can easily be implemented by everyone. So the question, is then why not? Why aren't we implementing these tips? And I suppose this is where we come to the hard part, and the question is change. As we all know in our work as researchers, change is hard. And I see 3 areas where we need change. We need to change business models. At the moment, it's very much a question of cheap and fast, often winning over quality. We need to realize that doing so, for example, minimizing incentives has a hidden cost. It has a hidden cost to data quality, to participant engagement, and ultimately to business impact. And we need to take that cost into account, I think, in our business models if we're to be sustainable in our industry in the future. Secondly, we need to change our attitude. We need to truly believe that this is important. And attitude change is also hard, but I think most people probably listening to the webinar today, to some extent, are believers. So let's tick that box. And then finally, I think we need to change processes. We need to design research with participants in mind as well as the end client. And we need to not only do that internally, but throughout the value chain. So how clients work with agencies, how agencies work with data collectors. Those processes, I think, need to be developed to be participant centric. And again, that's something that's maybe not so easy for companies to do. So I'd like to thank everybody for listening today, for participating in the webinar. And finally, I'd like to draw your attention to some things which I hope are useful resources for you as you look forward to develop yourself as a researcher, as a business leader within our industry. So in addition to the handbook, we've also got the Global Trust Survey report, which I briefly mentioned today. In addition to the global report, there are individual reports for the USA, the UK, Australia, Germany and Peru. So if you're interested in those countries, you can read their own reports. We also have the Building Business Impact Executive Summary and Handbook. So if you're really interested in how to get the most value for clients out of insights, I definitely recommend reading that. And obviously on the GRBN website, there's a lot of news, not only about these projects, but everything else we're getting up to. And once, we share this deck with you, and there'll be links to each of these resources within that deck. So hopefully you'll take advantage of these free resources for you. So thanks everybody very much. I wish you a wonderful summer and all of the best with your engaging respondents, participants, not just this year, but as we work into next year. Thank you very much, and a big thank you for all the experts on the panel today. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.